TV, Nakuru.
All right, thanks, Bridget, for that. And quite strong views there from Kenyans across those different parts of the country. And just to try and unpack and break down the budget statement that was delivered today by the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury and Economic Planning, I'm joined this evening by FCPA Bilo Kero, who's an economist as well as a politician, a businessman. Thank you for joining us. Okay. Indeed, but thank you for joining us. We also do have Sami Karanja, who is the CEO of the MSME Alliance, to also just give us his perspective from that angle. Just listening to what Kenyans have to say, Mheshimiwa Kero, interesting remarks there, and many you can see from across the different parts of the country really opposed to some of the proposals that, first of all, we have within the finance bill. Let me first get your initial impressions of the budget that was read today.
Well, I think your editors have aptly described it. It's a budget of sorrows. That's what they said. Well, I think it's a very painful budget. I mean, listening to what the seers have said, and the budget coming a week or so after Kenyans have expressed their indignation with the finance bill and some of the tax measures, one would have expected that the minister would be a bit, would sober up on some of the things. But I think they seem to be very determined on those tax measures. And for Kenyans, I think the issue, the elephant in the room is the tax measures. It's not about living, because when the government talks of we want to live within our means, and that's why we're doing this. The issue, if you want to live within your means, what you need to live with is your expenditure. If I want to live within my means, I control my expenditure. It's not about the revenue. So you don't tell Kenyans that, look, we want to live within our means and therefore we have to collect more revenue.
But even with that expenditure, I mean, the Cabinet Secretary has talked about proposing hiring freeze, suspension of refurbishment of state offices, furniture purchases for a year to slash this public spending.
Zainab, those things are not new. If you look at all the budgets that have been presented in the last, even the 10 years of Uhuru, it has always talked about rationalizing expenditure. Right. Rationalizing public service. You remember when Uhuru first came in and even stopped the kind of vehicles that were being used and introduced those
doing away with the guzzlers, they used to call it.
Right. I mean, this story is there, but the reality is you just need to see the reports by the Controller of Budget, which deals with the implementation. When it comes to implementation, you find the austerity is thrown out through the window, and you find the lavish expenditures, the wastage of resources, the inefficiencies, the mismanagement. These things are there. So for me, really for me, the issue is revenue has never been an issue. Look at the three budgets presented today. Uganda, Tanzania, and Rwanda. Right. Here, the total revenue for all the three of them added together is the same as the revenue of Kenya government. One country, population of 50 million, we are collecting the same amount of tax as 120 million in the other three East African countries. And then when you come to expenditure, more or less the same. Our expenditure budget is at $1 billion. When you look at the other three combined, it's just $2 billion above that. I mean, it's more or less the same. So we are really, Kenyans are paying taxes. That has never been an issue. From the time of Kibaki up to now, we have raised more taxes than all the East African countries combined. The issue has always been how to manage the resources. And I think some of the measures he outlined really, we'll do a wage freeze and those things. I think clearly they've already come up with a budget that they will spend 3.9 or 4 trillion shillings. So, I mean...
So you feel it doesn't have much impact?
No, you see, it's the measures he's suggesting is after the act. He has already said, I'm going to spend 4 trillion. So telling Kenyans, I'm going to cut down on my expenditure, when you have already said my expenditure will be 4, I mean, it's inconsequential. I think that what Kenyans want to see is Kenyans want to be allowed to live a life where they can be able to make ends meet. That's what they want.
All right. And we'll come back to try and make sense of why the government has decided to do this. But Sami, you also initial observations from that statement.
Zainab, I think this is a very ambitious budget, and they are taxing the same people. You see, the government has failed to increase the tax base, the innovativeness of collection of taxes. And so what has been happening? The micro, small, medium enterprises plus other businesses are the ones who are carrying that load. So you're talking about 3.9, almost 4 trillion shillings from the same, taxing the same businesses. When you look at the expenditure, you look at the recurrent is 2.8 trillion shillings. I agree with what Mheshimiwa has said. If you cannot be able to raise a certain amount of money, you cut the expenditure. But we are seeing an extravagance in this government that we have never seen before. We have seen a push and pull that they have also initiated. And let me give an example. You had the finance bill and every person was talking about the things that they have to change. There's nothing that has changed. You remember the last finance bill, 90% of those things that we told them, they never did. I think this one is going to be 100%. So then what is the rationale behind the finance bill taking it to the public for public prosecution? You take it to the public because they are your employers. They tell you, we cannot be able to do this, we cannot be able to do this. Then you go back to your back office and say, the people who have employed us, they are telling us we can't raise this amount of money. So what do we do? So when you look at the bloated government, when you look at the trips which have been happening, when you look at the extravagance which the government is having, the weight is in the shoulders of business people. So it becomes very irrational, it becomes very weighty, and that's why the frustrations that you're seeing. You are looking at what, when I was going through the budget, you have even the contingency fund, which they have hit it to about 4 billion shillings. You look at, this one is unaccounted for. Is unanticipated for projects which they may arise. Why should you put that kind of money? And I remember, I think it's one of the senators, I think his Omtata was prosecuting this budget, and was saying that then why should you put such kind of colossal amounts of money unaccounted for? So the corruption that has been experienced and lack of sensitivity that has been experienced is killing businesses. And let me say this lastly. We were interacting with some businesses and they were saying, we are going to come out from Kenya, we are going to set up base. And one particular industry said, we are going to go and set base in the US and sell the same product here in Kenya, and it's going to be cheaper than the way you could have set the base here in Kenya and sold it in Kenya. Then if, for example, you milk the cow dry, where are you going to get the taxes? Initially, what you're supposed to do as a government is to create a conducive environment so that you can now come and demand taxes. In the 4 trillion government budget, what are you doing to businesses as an incentive to help those businesses gather or transact more money so that you can get the taxes? So if you continue milking, what will happen is that people are going to get out of this environment, go to the neighboring countries, set base there, enjoy what we call the East African Common Tariff, sell things back in Kenya cheaply, and we lose on jobs, and we lose on businesses, and we lose on revenue. So I don't think they are going to meet even the...
So this has a trickle-down effect on the common mwananchi, somebody who's there.
It does. Life is going to be very difficult in the next financial year.
And even when you look at those indirect taxes, I mean, some of the proposals, if I can just have a look at the contentious proposals, 16% value-added tax on banking services, and I know that touches highly on also, MSMEs. The eco-levy, proposals to increase VAT on bread, and 25% excise duty on both crude and refined vegetable oils. Common mwananchi is the one who's going to feel the effect. Remember, we're already living in a space where the budget, the household budget, is quite pinched, very tight. Does this mean it's going to get worse?
No, it certainly will get worse, but it's a question that everyone is asking. I mean, why is the government not sensitive to all these concerns by the ordinary people? People already, we have a government that on one hand says our economy is stable, it's back on its feet.
Correct.
The next minute they tell you our economy is bad, we must raise taxes. I mean, really, that's the contradiction we have seen in this government. Look, there are many countries in Africa where the basic essential goods are not taxed. Go to Ethiopia here, try to tax cooking oil, they won't. Go to Egypt, go to many of these countries, they look at the basic necessities as really essential for everyone, because people must have food. People must have some basic services, education, food, and those things are basic. Government cannot go taxing in those areas. But we've gone to a situation where bread is now considered a luxury, it will be taxed. When you tax that cooking oil, all the mama mbogas who are cooking chapatis and things outside here, the maragwes and all those things will go up significantly. Your blue band will go up by 80% because of that, because it's made from the oil. I mean, so we don't see why. And this is a government that came on a platform of containing the cost of living. That was the reason why they were elected. They said, really, we must deal with the issue of taxes to reduce the cost of living. So how are you going to reduce the cost of living when you actually raise it? So the situation, I think, in my view, for the ordinary people is likely to, unless something is done on the finance bill, and I hope they will. If they don't, then I think the situation is likely to get worse for people.
And I mean, on the finance bill, let's just touch on that now. I mean, it has undergone public participation. You say it's a cosmetic exercise. We know what happened during the last time public participation happened. Most of those proposals were actually shoved aside, and, you know, the act was bulldozed, you know, the bill was bulldozed into an act. But the cabinet secretary says these measures are supposed to bring in this extra 346 billion shillings in additional revenues. This is up from the 211 billion shillings in this current financial year. Ambitious?
Very. What is the rationale behind you adding transactional cost? What will it do to businesses? Number one, you're going to do pillow banking. So that means you're not going to systemize our money. Because ideally, when you charge excise from 15 to 20%, and you also add VAT to the transactional value, so what will happen to me? I am a business person in Kirinyaga Road. I send my spares to Embu. The person in Embu is sending money to me after I am able, you know, after I deliver. So what will happen is the transactional cost, because every shilling that comes into my business, I have to account it. So if, for example, I'm sending, let's say, an example with 16,000, they are sending 16,000 shillings to me. They have to send 16,000 shillings plus the additional excise and also the VAT. So it comes to about 16,400 shillings. The 400 shillings is very expensive venture when it comes to business, because when you look accumulatively, the compound effect of it at the end of the day, at the end even of the year, is a lot of money.
They'll charge onto the space.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. So what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to facilitate trade through lessening the costing and make it more effective in terms of cost of of doing business. Make it so efficient for me to pay Mheshimiwa a service or a good that he has given to me, and make it so affordable to me. Right now it's becoming expensive. So what will happen is people are going to go back to what you are calling the pillow banking. Why? Because if you go to a shop, they're going to say, okay, instead of me going to an extra cost of 200 shillings, why can't I send my person to give you this cash money? So what will happen is we are not going to be able to systemize that money. So what are you going to tax? What are you going to tax? When it's pillow banking, when you have cash transactions, what are you going to tax? So when you look at the things that the government is doing, I do not know the advice that they are getting. And let's even go to eco-tax, the one they're going to introduce. Right. They are going to charge monitors, mobile phones. They are going to go to charge papers. They are going to go and charge diapers of children. Right.
So what's the net effect of this?
Since you see, these are, I may say, consumables. Let me give an example with diapers of children. Nowadays, we don't do nappies, when we're growing up with nappies. Now, right now, they are diapers. Even to the person in the most remote informal sector or informal settlement, they use diapers. What are you doing? When you are taxing such basic needs which are supposed to be tax-free, you unafinyilia the common mwananchi. You are pressing the common mwananchi to an unprecedented levels. They're going to be an uproar. So when you're looking at what the government is doing, there is, and Mheshimiwa here is an economist, there is a science behind when you give incentives, people pay more taxes. Why? Like I remember we had a person in the panel, and they were saying when the government lessened the transactional cost, even the banking deposits went up. Even the profits of the bank transactions went up. Why? Because there is a science behind you paying your taxes and being given cushioning by the government, because they are now bringing more people into the tax base. Right. What government has lacked is innovative ways of collection of taxes, and they are there even as we continue. I'm going to spell out some of the things that.
And we're coming back to those innovative ways that perhaps government can try and employ in these proposals and measures that they've put in place. But we have to take a first break here on NTV Tonight. We're going to be back with much more and continue with this conversation. Stay with us.